Hi, I'm Steve Pleich, and welcome to this edition of Voices from the Village. As you can see, we're in the conference room at community television, and we're, like everybody else, sheltering in place and making sure we are socially distant and maintaining those COVID-19 protocols so that everybody is safe, and we're hoping that you do the same. But even though we're under a lot of restrictions for COVID-19 and social distancing and sheltering in place, it doesn't mean that we can't continue to produce quality programming here at community television. One of the things we always try to do during the election cycle is bring you the candidates, let you know a little bit about them, introduce them to you, and give more of a personal idea of who that person is and what that person is doing to really make the sacrifice to step into public life. And we're really happy to have with us today Kayla Kumar. Kayla, welcome.
Thank you so much.
Kayla is a first-time candidate for City Council, so congratulations on really stepping up and doing that. Kayla, tell our audience just a little bit about yourself and really what brought you to throw your hat in the ring for public life.
Yeah, great question. I am running for office because of the turning point that we're experiencing as a community. I think it's an understatement to say that we're at a very choiceful moment as a community about who we are, what's essential to us, what matters most to us, and how do we move forward, right, with the answers to those questions. For me, I saw right when this crisis hit that those decision-making processes were moving farther and farther away from the people, from community members, particularly from those who are struggling the most from the impact of our crisis. And that's really what called me. I said this decision-making process must be rooted in the community. And so, just given the stations that I have throughout the county and of course the city of Santa Cruz itself, I work with young people. I'm on a juvenile justice commission. I'm on the board of Civic para la Gente and community ventures, economics, healthcare, youth, justice. I knew that that position lent itself to me to be able to really nestle that decision making in the people.
Well, you certainly have a very rich public service background already, so that's terrific. One of the things that makes this election cycle unique is that as a former candidate, I can tell you that it's almost always very canvassing driven, very door knocking. And now that we have the restrictions, how has that affected your ability to kind of meet people individually and really reach out to the individual voter?
I mean, it's going to have to take a bigger crisis than this to keep me from getting to the people. I have to tell you that. Yeah. I won't say that I'm zoomed out, but Zoom has been the mode for a little bit, and I certainly miss in-person conversations. But we'll make do with what we have right now. That's what we do, right?
Absolutely.
In crisis. We are innovating. I think all the candidates are, but myself included. Getting out online, getting out on social media where people are now. A lot of people are there, and bit by bit, out in the community, we're seeing people come out into green space, and they're practicing social distance. They're still being relatively safe, and so we're trying to think of what are innovative ways to kind of meet people where they're at now and safe.
Well, you're certainly very prominent on Facebook, so congratulations for that. I think people are beginning to know who you are. So let's talk about a couple of different issues. The city, even before COVID-19 and the economic challenges that's presented, was facing budget deficits partially due to the CalPERS reconciliation, that kind of thing. So what are your ideas about how to revive the city's economy, try to balance the budget or move toward a balanced budget while still maintaining the essential city services like parks and recs and public works and those kinds of things?
Yeah, well, Steve, we should be having a conversation about what the city of Santa Cruz is doing with all of the money coming down from the federal government in crisis response. That's really the conversation. If this government was working correctly at the federal level, we should be having. And we should be talking about how we're building apparati, as opposed to the plural, of how to get that capital flowing to the places in our community that need it most. We're not having that conversation because the federal government is not being a leader on this. And so part of the revival that you're talking about is trying to fill that gap and advocating for those resources. I'm starting to do it already, talking with state legislators, and at some point, me and Jimmy are going to have to connect as well.
There you go.
So that part of the work is really important. But as you say, what is perhaps the most important step that a council member is going to have to take is around the budget. Those decisions, making sure those decisions are equitable. And so what I mean by that is I will be one of those council members. It's going to be a long council meeting. We are going line by line. Pardon me. We're going line by line, and we are talking about why is this necessary? What purpose does it serve? Why is this the best use for this public resource? And how does it meet the moment that we're in? I venture to say in the conversations that I've had with the financial leaders in the city that there's a lot of expenses that we can't cinch up. Admin bloat is a phrase that we hear a lot about the budget. I want to take a look at that. I want to understand that the kind of high-paid consultants that are often brought in to carry out these studies that sometimes go nowhere. Those are places we can look at that aren't just automatically going to cutting the essential services that our city needs, right? And so for me, I'm very protective of that. I come from a place of how, in terms of equity, how are we centering those services that are not only meeting the basic needs, right? Like public works, water, parks, like these are not negotiable, and yet they're always on the chopping block. When a crisis like this occurs first, and it won't be on the chopping block first for me. I'll be looking at those other areas of bloat, of people at higher levels, right, that can bear the burden of a cut in a way that perhaps a low-wage worker at the city or programs that are serving our most vulnerable community members cannot bear.
It's interesting you mentioned that, and the money that really is becoming available from the federal, state, and whatnot, and particularly in terms of homelessness. As you know, Santa Cruz has the largest homeless population, certainly in the county, and per capita one of the largest in the state and the country. We have a lot of people who are very vulnerable and who really need our help. What is your response to that in terms of being able to have enough money to really provide services and shelter that people need?
How much time we got?
I know. It's
I've got a lot
problem.
to say. I'm going to try my best to get through all of it because it's a very nuanced question, and that's the first thing I always try to say at the beginning of a question like that. My answer is that people experiencing houselessness, there's a variety of experiences, a variety of reasons, a variety of needs, right? And so to say, like, how do we help the homeless community is a very complicated, complex question, and I try to engage it. And so for me, what this moment has shown us is that with the proper resources, that infrastructure popped up pretty darn quick.
Yes, it did. No question about it.
And I have to say, there's a lot of room to grow for sure. But I've been told since I've been here in Santa Cruz that was impossible. Right? There's just no way to do it, even if you had the funds. And we're seeing in this moment that's not true. The infrastructure is now up. How do we keep it up and keep it deepening and keep it growing and move past this, like, as a crisis response, right? Like I said earlier, part of the nuance is there are folks experiencing homelessness because they had an unexpected bill and they couldn't pay mortgage or couldn't pay rent. Those folks, if we have more affordable housing or housing stabilizing policies put into play, we can prevent from experiencing homelessness. That's part of this conversation, right? But there's also folks that have a different story. They come to experience homelessness because they're neuroatypical, because the way that we've organized human life isn't around those types of mental states, right? And so it's very hard to conform, it's very hard to procure shelter as someone that experiences the world differently in some of these ways. And so for those folks, I want to see more long-term, stable shelter options, right? That's the goal here. And I want those shelter options to have supportive services that meet their needs, that they don't have to receive just to receive the housing. I'm a strong housing first advocate. I mean, it is just an essential piece of this. But I want for those who want services, who do need help, to receive it. And so we can go deeper. I suspect that I don't want to go too long.
No, and I completely agree with what you're saying. In substance, myself, as someone who is a coordinator for one of the shelter projects here in town, and someone who has been emergency services, emergency shelter advocate for a long period of time, we are doing better, I think, but we really need, I think, as you have suggested, more transitional and permanent supportive housing.
Yes.
That's really the only practical way to get people up from off the streets into something better, presuming that's what they're going to aspire to.
Yeah.
Let's shift a little bit into public safety, as we were talking about earlier. In past election cycles, public safety has been probably the mantra. People talk about that, people talk about affordable housing, but I think now, because of Black Lives Matter movements and several things of that nature, we're moving back to public safety concerns. So what's your view of public safety in Santa Cruz, the need for it, and really how it should be structured as we move into the future?
Yeah, I mean, this moment is really calling us in to, as I said before, decide who we are, what matters to us, whose lives matter, and what the lengths we're willing to go to live out our values around that answer to that question. And what I'm hearing from people in Santa Cruz across ideologies, across identities, across groups, is that, pardon me, is that we're no longer willing to co-sign a system of creating safety that produces such nonchalant death of Black and brown people. And, you know, folks are done. I mean, out on the campaign trail, I can't stress it enough, I'm hearing it from, so many, and I'll be, you know, and they know that they're there, but they just don't know, like, where do you go? Like, what's the next concrete step? And so that's where I come in. Because, of course, my background for the better part of a decade has been in creating communities of care, responses to harm that actually meet the needs that arise from harm and prevent it from happening in the future, that are non-police responses. They are non-traumatic responses. They're community-based responses. They're life-affirming responses. And so I'm very lucky. I happen to know these programs exist and are real and their impact. And so how do we create a pathway forward that invests in those ways of creating safety, right? And lead us into the direction that I hear so many people wanting to go. And of course, that means that we have to look again to the budget. We have to look, where are we put our money where our ideas are, we put our money where we want to go, we put our money where our heart is. And in the budget, if you look at the budget, we're saying police are the response to social problems. That's the model we want to go with. So we need to take a look at that and move those resources to responses that align better with our values. And, you know, I'll share with you, Steve, there was a report done in 2018, not long ago. It was an audit that the city actually paid for of SCPD. And it took an analysis of the 911 calls that were diverted to SCPD, and it found that 15.5% of those calls were designated officially as crimes. Everything else, we're talking the biggest one, welfare checks, 20%. And I just don't believe that we need police to do those. You know, I'm willing to get in the weeds, and I know there's nuance, and I'm totally willing to do that. But this is where I come from when I say 15.5%. Let's start there. Let's talk about what resources are actually needed to do just that 15.5%, because all the calls you're getting for mental health support, substance abuse support, homelessness, I venture to say that non-violent, non-traumatic responses to those social issues are going to produce more safety. Safety occurs when people's needs are met. They're psychological, they're economic, they're social. Safety is produced that way. I've seen it, and it happens here locally in Santa Cruz as well. So that, I hope, gets to the question.
And I think you will find that we're fortunate here in Santa Cruz to have a department that will say to you that we're not social scientists. You know, we need to find a better way to be able to respond to, you know, the vast majority of calls that really are not crime related. They're simply, you know, people who are challenged by mental or behavioral or physical problems that should be treated or responded to in other ways. We've got maybe 3 or 4 more minutes. What is something that you'd like to tell the voters about why they should be voting for Kayla Kumar and how you're going to represent them when you're sitting on council this December? Oh yeah, I want to tell the voters that I'm going to fight for them. I'm going to fight for this city. We are in a place where we need bold, balanced, loving leadership that's ready to make the decisions that need to be made to create a new, better normal in Santa Cruz, and we need someone who's going to fight for that.
And I'm ready, and I have been. I just want to do it in this way that reaches more people. I will never stop working for this new normal, whether I'm on the dais or not, you know, and so I just want the voters to know that they have that option. They have the option of putting someone in the ring who will never stop working for the vision that they hold.
And of course, people can contribute to your campaign. They can certainly volunteer to do a little door knocking, and to the extent that we can do that. One thing that still is a controversy in town, and is very difficult to resolve, I think, is, as we go back to public safety just for a second, is whether or not the police department should be defunded, or some of the funds should be repurposed into more socially relevant, socially beneficial programs. As a council member, when you are examining the budget this coming year, is that something that you would give particular consideration to?
Yeah, to expand on what I said earlier, I would like to learn more about what funds, what activities. I am happy to begin the conversation at the SCPD, being allocated strictly to crimes. I can start there. The rest of it, those resources need to go to social services that are trained, compassionate, understand, are experts in meeting those social problems. So yes, I believe that we need to repurpose funds in a way that makes sense, that is life-affirming and sustainable and cost-effective.
You think as you go around and talk to folks and talk to them about public safety, particularly about the Black Lives Matter movement and those things that are really so relevant today, people have an interest, you think, in citizen oversight for the police department? Is that something that you may consider as a policy for yourself as you move forward as a council member this coming December?
You know, I can see that running in concert with the repurposing of funding. The oversight needs to have teeth. It needs to actually be able to co-create accountability with the policing system. I wouldn't want to ever center it as a cure-all, and I don't think anyone's proposing that. But you know, I think there are some reforms that are really important. And what I'm out here to do is push forward transformation, not necessarily, you know, these kind of more discrete reforms, right? I want to see a root level addressing of the way the policing system has, you know, has gone off course, you know, and become bigger than I believe what is the right size for that.
Well, wonderful. You're certainly an articulate spokesperson for very progressive politics here in Santa Cruz, and a really a refreshing glint of light here, I think.
Oh, thank you so much.
Congratulations stepping into the public light, Kayla Kumar, candidate for Santa Cruz City Council. Take a look at her Facebook page, take a look at all the publicity and the outreach that she will be doing between now and the vote in November, and give that things a look. This has been Steve Pleich on Voices from the Village, and we'll see you next edition.
Hi, I'm Kayla Kumar, and I'm running for Santa Cruz City Council. You can learn more about my campaign by visiting www.kumarforcouncil.com.